You have a global #1 movie.
It was a collaborative effort. I was a co-writer on that. The film came out at the end of September. The producers here in Australia were quietly optimistic that it would resonate. I think they were very confident with just the warmth and vibrance of what they had created and brought to the screen. They were really, really excited to see the numbers and to see the global response. And one of the nicest things I found was just people saying they'd watched it and they enjoyed it and, gave them like about 90 minutes or so of just escape. I'm so thankful for that opportunity because I do think it's now become a springboard for new work.
Welcome to the Scriptcake podcast. I am your host, Lavindra Gill, and this week we have a special guest from down under, Katherine McPhee. She's a screenwriter from Australia. She's a recipient of the Colin Thiel New Writing Scholarship and has worked in development writers' rooms for various production companies, including Fremantle and Matchbox Pictures. She co-wrote Love is in the Air, which reached the global #1 position on Netflix upon its release just a few months ago. Welcome to the podcast, Katherine.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, one of the first questions I always love to ask writers on our show is, what is your origin story? How did you get from someone who wanted to work in the this wonderful industry that we call the film industry and get to the point where you have a #1 global movie, which is very impressive, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind. Sure. Well, I guess it would track way back to when I was a child. This interest that I had in storytelling, which I guess at first wasn't articulated to be for the screen. It was just storytelling in general. I was a very, very quiet, shy child, exceedingly so. So in the preschool years, I was comfortable around my family, but when it came time to go places, I was just so shy. So much to the point that when it was time to go to kindergarten, I didn't want to go. So I somehow worked out that I could ask my parents if my grandma could come along with me. I'm sure there were several meetings behind the scenes that helped facilitate that. So as it turned out, from pretty much my whole kindergarten year, I had my Nan with me. She was called Nan. So it was BYO grandma. And, so she had to come along with me, walk me to kindies, stay around, snack time, playtime, all the rest, push me on the swings. I'm sure the educators were hoping that they could coax me towards playing with other children, but I was just a very shy kid and I was much more comfortable having my Nan with me. So that was me essentially before school years. And I think at some point what happened was, being so quiet and being so introverted, I found myself people watching all the time. So I must have always been quite an observational person, just taking things in, ruminating on them. So I think probably my affinity for storytelling and wanting to eventually, when I could write, put pen to paper, would have stemmed from people watching, just having a natural curiosity for humans, what they do, why they do it. And then as the school years progressed and went on, I did find my voice, so much so that by the time I was finishing up in secondary school, I was doing drama. At one point, I thought I was interested in acting, but yeah, I think the introverted part of me kicked in when push came to shove, and I just realized that writing was much more my jam. And then I guess from that, kind of the drive for the kinds of stories I wanted to tell started to take shape a lot more beyond school. When I went to university, I just, often found myself looking around, seeing stories everywhere, so many untold stories everywhere, and noticing, people who perhaps needed their stories amplified, that weren't getting an opportunity or a platform, particularly as a woman, as a female. I've just noticed where I am anyway and where I come from. There's always been a lot of men working in this industry, and I'm really loving the last few years, particularly the tide turning with seeing women like Emerald Fennell and other people like her at the helm and captaining their own female authored stories. So I went to university quite a long time ago. It took me quite a while to start to gain opportunities to work on other people's projects and to hone the craft, but I'm really just starting to get somewhere now. I was hustling for quite a few years, pitching and trying to work out what style I belonged to in terms of the kinds of writing I like to do.
talked about your finding your voice. Can you define that for me? Because it's a nebulous thing that we hear about every year where
Ah.
people are always like agents and managers. Well, I'm looking for someone with a voice. Well, what does that mean to you?
Sure. Yeah, I know it is. It's probably one of the most overused or most frequently used terms in the business. And I do see that. I think for my voice, it's probably more of a retrospective thing, right? Like I think that when you start to work out beats or drill into the components of whatever the story is that you're writing, for me mine's often character led. So I come from a place of character first, and then I build a story around a person or an experience. But I completely subconsciously, like without tracking anything, I would say the first 6 or 7 specs that I wrote were all about marginalized, underestimated women kind of being challenged and pushed to the point that they had to pivot, make a change, break out, rise above, all of that. And what was interesting to me in retrospect was that these women were in like all sorts of different story worlds. So from like sci-fi, I've written westerns, sci-fi, buddy cop film kind of format, kitchen sink drama, even like really kind of all these different genres I was almost transplanting these different kinds of women into, and particularly women who like to drink. That must have been just something that was threaded along. Why are all these women drinking so much? And I don't know if that was a reflection on where I was at the time, in my 20s and early 30s, particularly. Just women who felt frustrated and needed to bust out and shake things up and make a change. And whether they were, fighting crime or fending off aliens or like, a colonial period Western even. That's what I'm still working on at the moment. But it was just these women everywhere. So I think looking into all of that, my voice must be, and I think is, just really distinctively female, looking at what it is that women put up with in tandem with the other things that women put up with a lot of shit. We like we have babies. We, as Beyonce says, we get back to business. Like women fascinate me, and I guess it's writing from the perspective of being a woman. I feel like I can lean into an experience or experiences that I've had. So that probably is the best way to drill into my voice, me anyway. And then I can also, I guess, look into within that, the different things that I've experienced and how I can thread those through the stories too, leaning into kind of lived experience and writing what I know. But that said, stemming right back from when I was a kid, I love escaping too. So I love fantasy, sci-fi, revisionist history, an example, just something that I would watch 20 seasons of is The Great. I think that's one of the best shows in recent years. The fact that, that's a really powerful example, I think, of the kind of voice that I would love to emulate if I could, cherry pick different components of other people's work that I love and would like to emulate myself. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that you mentioned there, I want to dig a little further into. You said your character first, because a lot of questions that I get when I'm lecturing or talking to people about scripts, is it the plot first? Is it the character first? Like, how do you figure out what it is? And I don't know that there's a wrong answer. I think it's what works best for each person, but your character first. So tell me how that works for you.
I think like it must be an instinctive thing that I only realize in retrospect, or when I take stock of things that I've tried to, write, or things I've had to shelve, or things that have legs, is that I think for me, when a character comes into my mind, and that could be anywhere, like I love to exercise, so it could be on the treadmill or out walking or amongst nature, or probably most inconveniently when I'm speaking to someone or I'm out somewhere. And then, when you come up with a story, an idea, and you're like, I'm at lunch, or I'm picking my kids up, or I'm meant to be talking to someone in the schoolyard, or, playing sport even. And it kind of can be inconvenient because things just come to us, right? Like when they come to us. And sometimes, I can just really vividly see someone taking shape in my mind. From there, immediately they seem to just get propelled into whatever challenge or predicament I find might be most interesting to see them contend with. And then the story world kind of builds from there. That's just my experience anyway, but just being deeply fascinated by human behavior and just the plethora of all the things we can be and feel and do. And I also love the idea that my husband and I talk about this sometimes, like, we're not trees. We don't need to be deeply rooted somewhere or to something. We can pick up and move and change. And I think we're meant to change as people. And that fascinates me. And I think the idea of change fits really well with the idea of this screen storytelling, characters having arcs, starting somewhere, finishing up somewhere else. So I'm always kind of person first, and then what happens next to them, or where do they go?
Well, just so we're clear, I'm a character first myself. And
Very cool.
that is something that I bump up on a lot of people on. But once I get into the process and talk about how it works for me, I see a lot of light bulbs going off and going, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I love coming up with a great personal story or something that, I've connected to in a character, and then finding the right world in which to place them. I think that's a much more effective way than picking a world and kind of limiting what you can do before you even know what your character is. When I do work for hire, I get hired to write screenplays for people. It usually comes with a plot, and then I've got to like force fit it to the character and make it come together. But when I'm developing it myself, I prefer to do it that way. So it's nice to hear that you like to do it that same way as well. But yeah, I think the whole character thing goes back to how you spoke about people watching when you were young. You were developing your character skills, but you didn't even know it.
Yeah, true. Yeah, very interesting. And again, that's just something instinctive, isn't it? Or even subliminal. It's really interesting, I find, in this era of us being so connected to our phones and technology and social media. I get really almost like, I don't know if nostalgic's the right word, but just, I guess sometimes I feel like it would be nice to go back to that time in the 90s, pre-internet, when I was a kid growing up, that we didn't have that constant connectivity and we were free to daydream a bit more or even be bored. I think there's a lot to be said for having to wait somewhere without having a task or something to jump to. And I think that must have been really instrumental for me anyway, just being a kid who was on the periphery a little bit or shy and not necessarily diving headfirst into social things. I must have just been bored sometimes or looked around started to let my imagination start firing. Yeah.
My kids, I have 2 teenagers. And so I grew up in the internet age, and it's a completely different life than I grew up with. I remember I would leave on a Saturday morning and be home when the street lights came on because I knew it was time for dinner. And my parents didn't know where I was or what I was doing. And we were out in the creeks and building dams and, out in the woods and just, playing with each other. And your imagination does come to life in those situations. So
it does.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this next generation.
Absolutely. I hear you. Yeah, we have a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old. And yeah, especially with our 12-year-old, I am seeing that now. A phone is super new for her. We've only just relented really recently, and we're restricting what she can do so far. But I guess there's different ways of looking at it. They're going to gain a lot of opportunities via being so tech savvy and connected to people all over the world. But it is a bit sad when you see them, waiting to start their sports training or walking home or hanging around in groups and their eyes are all down on their phones. I don't love that. But
I told you that I was at my daughter's tennis match today.
How did she go? Yes.
Which they won doubles. They won very nice. They played well, 6-4, 6-4. Very proud. But
awesome.
After the first set, there was a break, so both her and her teammate came out, and were outside the court getting water. And teammate grabbed the phone and was checking the phone in the middle of the match.
Oh my gosh.
That's a little too much for me, but what are you going to do? Anyways, moving forward, you said you've been working at this for some time now. I think on average to become an overnight success, it takes like 10 to 20 years or something like that. So how long did it take you to become an overnight success?
Oh, I wouldn't even call me a success yet. I'm still just emerging, honestly, and getting started. But
you have a global #1 movie.
Oh, yes, but that's very kind of you. And again, it was a collaborative effort. I was a co-writer on that, and I'm so thankful for that opportunity, because I do think it's now become a springboard for new work. And one of the nicest things that has come from the last couple of months, the film came out at the end of September. The producers here in Australia were quietly optimistic that it would resonate. I think they were very confident with just the warmth and, you know, vibrance of what they had created and brought to the screen. But they were really, really excited to see the numbers and to see the global response. And one of the nicest things I found was just people saying they'd watched it and they enjoyed it, and, you know, gave them like about 90 minutes or so of just escape. You know, it's very lighthearted and zesty. So just people's feedback and kindness has been one of the nicest things I would say about, having a, you know, film that I wrote out into the world for the first time. That's been my favorite part of it.
Well, get ready to feel nice, because I watched it and I enjoyed it.
Oh, that's really
Yeah.
sweet.
Strong female characters across the board. You know,
Yeah.
even you know, one of the characters who's not in the movie that has this great presence throughout the film.
Would that be
Um,
Nikki, the BFF?
for me, it was the mom.
Oh,
Mom had this incredible presence throughout the film, and she's not
yeah.
a character in the movie, or an actor doesn't play her, I guess, in photographs and whatnot.
Mm.
It was about the mom's vision and about the mom's dream, and it's always about the dad's vision, about the dad's dream, and everything else that you see. And this one isn't. And then the BFF Nikki is very powerful. You know, like boom, great character, great actor. Your lead, of course, is not what you would expect the lead to be. A female pilot, you know, a female mechanic. A lot of these positions that you talk about are historically male-dominated positions. And so, you know, you're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk. You're making these characters into three-dimensional people. I thought the casting was great, by the way.
Oh, I agree. They did a top job.
Yeah,
Yeah, the cast was
I greatly dislike
brilliant.
love stories where the leads have no chemistry, and I thought your leads had very nice chemistry. So it was nice. It was nice and soft, and it was just a beautiful journey to go on. But before we get there, I want to talk about your journey getting to the point where you're about to get a movie made. Okay, how
Sure.
many scripts did you write before you got this one that was made?
There's a lot in I know everyone has a bottom drawer, or, you know, or like a folder, a digital folder, that things that won't see light of day. Look, I went to university way back in 2007. I finished, so it's been quite some time between graduating to now. I went to the university I went to is Flinders University in South Australia, and I did have stars in my eyes, because at that point I'd applied to I was finishing up in our final year here, which for us is year 12. So I believe that's senior year over there. And I knew that I wanted to do something creative, and I was leaning towards writing in some form. But I did apply to several universities for different degrees. I got into law, and I got into creative arts in screen. So I had this period for a couple of weeks that I needed to make a decision, which was, in retrospect, I've laughed about many times with my husband, and kind of, you know, what if I'd done law? I wouldn't have been a starving artist for so long, but probably wouldn't have done other things. So I must have just wanted to do it way back then. My parents were amazing. They were always really hard workers themselves. You know, I think their work ethic was really inspiring to me, and they were wholeheartedly supportive of, you know, go off and do whatever you want to do. So I chose screen studies, and the degree that I was doing, there are a couple of well-known people who had studied there and done that same course. So one of them was Scott Hicks, and
Wow.
he was, you know, so the film that he brought to the world in 1997, I think it was, or thereabouts, was Shine, nominated for a bunch of Academy Awards. And I think Geoffrey Rush might have won Best Actor for that. So
phenomenal film, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like, that was a really special film, and his legacy was quite prevalent, like here in the filmmaking community in South Australia, which is certainly not, you know, the biggest or most populated state here. You know, more so people, you know, think of Sydney or eastern states for film and screen. So he'd done this course, and actually on the front.
Are you anywhere near Adelaide? Adelaide?
Oh, Adelaide, yes. Yeah, that's where I grew up.
Okay.
Adelaide.
I have a friend who just happens to be from Adelaide, and I never even thought about that, but I remember thinking it was in South Australia. So at least I've heard of some of those areas. That's nice.
Oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah, Adelaide isn't super well known internationally. We've kind of got a bit of a reputation for being like a large suburban kind of city, although it's growing and thriving in many sectors. But for sure, like, yeah, Adelaide's lovely. I'm biased. I grew up here, but it is lovely. Have you like had your friend visit you, or you visited over here in Australia?
I was teaching documentary filmmaking in Bolivia, and
Oh, wow.
I was running a nonprofit in Bolivia, but she was from Australia and from Adelaide. She's on Facebook, so I can see pictures from Adelaide every once in a while. But yeah, it's a small world when you think about it.
That's
Yeah.
cool. Oh, it is. Very small world. So this is where I studied. And on the front, like there was a booklet when we started engaging in enrolling for our university degrees. And they literally had a picture of an Academy Award on the front of it. I think, which I thought, I mean, looking back, it's quite funny. But at the time, you know, you're 18 years old and you're like, wow, that could be me.
It could be you.
And then I think there are a couple of other alumni, like Robert Luketic, who directed Legally Blonde. Yeah, he did the same course too. So there were all these, you know, exciting kind of possibilities in my mind anyway. And so that's where I studied. It was a great all-rounder, you know, a long time ago now, but and this was pre-Facebook era too, you know. I think, yeah, I finished up in like 07. So that's when Facebook was only just coming out. I distinctively remember we had one class one day, and one of my classmates who went on to be a producer himself, actually, he was like, guys, before we start, I've got to show you something. It's going to blow your mind. It's called YouTube. And I remember our lecturer was like, we've got to get started. He's like, no, just give me a minute. You've got to see this. And YouTube had just launched effectively, like what, a week or two earlier. And for us as, you know, film production students, seeing people upload their own videos or short films onto an online global platform was really like mind-blowing at the time. And I still remember everyone's buzz, like, ooh, we were all just like, how do we go to the next video? You know, that kind of thing. Yeah. So I'm also showing my age. Like that's how long ago I studied.
You were but a child. No, I'm
Oh,
way older than you are. So no, I appreciate that. Absolutely. But YouTube is it's still growing and growing at an insane pace. Great place for people to put content out.
I agree. Yeah, this is it. I think it allowed for maybe a barrier or a gatekeeper, as effectively, you know, to be removed for people who didn't necessarily want to wait to be able to produce or have their content seen by people. And I know it's a big beast now, like it's a big machine, but I think it's really cool. The fact that people can just create, make, and put it out there for people to see is really awesome.
Absolutely. So you're in college, and were you a screenwriting major, or did it not break down into specific categories? Like what was the situation there?
Yeah, it did for the final year. So I did my 3-year undergraduate degree, and then I applied for and was successful in the honours program. So then for that 4th year honours, we had to specialise. So yeah, I did effectively specialise in screenwriting, which also at the time went hand in hand with directing. It wasn't that you could kind of just choose to write a short film, because that's what we did in place of a thesis. We, wrote, directed, and, had a producer with us and made a short film. But at that stage, I, still being introverted back then, even now still, I didn't have the confidence with directing, but it was doubled up so that you did direct the film that you wrote. So I wrote and directed my first short. And I think that was a really great way to spend the year. Lots of learning curves, lots of fun too. Like, we had pretty modest budgets, but we had to see it through. We also had another module that we did. We got to shoot on film. That was really cool.
Very nice.
We did like this really fun little spaghetti Western set in a laundromat. I still remember that. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so when I finished up with that, I had decided that screenwriting was something I wanted to do. It was still, even back then, like very niche in that sense. Like other people that I went to university with, and several of them have gone on to be quite successful in their fields and in their chosen professions, editors and, VFX, supervisors, producers. Like there are quite a few people I studied with, and directors as well, that are doing really well here in Australia, and some internationally too. But screenwriting was niche and still feels pretty niche. So I didn't go off and do a lot of practical kind of jobs, or I didn't go and job on set. What we did instead is I'd met my he would eventually be my husband. I'd met him by then, and we decided we wanted to go live abroad and work abroad and have an adventure. So we just saved some money, went overseas for a while, and lived in London with my sister and her husband, and went backpacking through Europe. And he's a big Formula One nut. He's just still to this day. So I've watched all of Drive to Survive. Amazing drama.
Drive
As
to
a side.
Survive got my family into Formula One.
Oh, I can see why. It's incredible, right?
It was just during the pandemic, and we had nothing to watch. And my daughter and I sat down, and now she's a huge McLaren fan.
Oh,
And
McLaren.
I'm a Ferrari fan. And I am a Williams fan because I like an underdog. And
Oh,
my son, who's crazy, he loves the guy whose dad's a billionaire, so he has him on the team. You know what I mean?
oh, yeah. I think I know which driver you mean. Yeah, yeah.
He loves the nepotism, so he's like, that's the best driver. It's
Oh,
like,
that's so cool.
billionaire, so I can be on a Formula One team. I was like, even if I was, son, you wouldn't be on a. That's funny. Yeah, we actually went to the British Grand Prix last year when we were in England.
Oh,
So,
did you enjoy it in Silverstone?
Silverstone is amazing. Yeah,
Oh,
we didn't even know anything about it. That morning, we flew in from Budapest, and we're like, let's go to London because we had an extra week before we had to be home. And I'm like, what's going on? And my daughter goes, oh, the British Grand Prix this afternoon. And so between landing at 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., we got tickets and made our way over there. It was amazing. And being, first time people that had ever gone there, didn't think anything about how hard it would be to get a ride back to London from. So, so it took us a few hours to get a ride back. So
but you were there. Like that's like a act now, think later kind of thing. Like you got there, which is amazing at short notice too. That's incredible.
Yeah, we're that's how we roll. We're short notice people. That actually happened to be the same week of Wimbledon, so we up and went to Wimbledon that week as well.
Oh my gosh.
So, but we're not talking about me.
Cool dad. Your kids must be. You're such a cool dad.
Well, it's mostly my wife. I just tag along, but yeah, we try to have a good time when we can. But so you're traveling the world, gaining all these wonderful experiences to put into your screenplays. Okay.
Yeah.
And then how do you get from there? I think the question was, how many did you write until you sold a script or got hired to write a script? And then if that wasn't this one, then how much longer did it take to get to this one being made?
Looking back at the span of time from finishing university, life experience, working out that I just needed to put my head down and get good at the craft. And that sounds obvious, or at least get comfortable with it. I probably wrote about 20 feature specs, I would say. And yeah, it's in the region of 20 or so. And then same with pilots. Like I just, I never did the thing where I tried my hand at writing an existing like TV pilot, like, like a sitcom or, like try my hand at writing an episode of Breaking Bad or something. Like I didn't do that, although I've read so many of them and just love so many people's work. But I just wrote my own original pilots, I would say in the realm of about maybe 8 or 9.
Wow.
And then yeah, and these so in terms of having a slate of written work, it was quite big, but then there were some that, I wouldn't ever want to see the light of day. Like looking back now, as we say here in Australia, like, well, some people like full shame job, like shame, like I just, like, what was I thinking? But then, some of those I shouldn't be totally negative when it comes to the early things I wrote, because some of them were really good springboards to get funding and support from our state agency that we have here. So I got to be funded, to write drafts and to be mentored with script editors and, well-known production companies here in Australia, having mentoring from them, even shadowing a couple of people. So like, I think that's the thing about, just putting your head down and writing and just getting something on the page and then polishing it up enough until you're comfortable to show it to someone. It can lead to something else. So that's what happened to me over the years. I got a few different rounds of funding support, gained a little bit of confidence that way. I was always trying to learn and upskill when opportunities came along. Like I remember I went over to the London Screenwriters Festival one year. That was really cool, listening to just people talk about their own experiences. And I think the year that I went, there was W. Peter Rylif was there talking about writing Point Break. That was really cool.
Yeah.
Things like that, like going and just mixing amongst other screenwriters. I think we can be a lonely bunch, as I'm sure you know. It's so sometimes you just need, even if it's only once or twice a year, just to get to a film festival or a conference or a workshop of some kind and look around at your peers and see that you're not alone. And there's a lot of people out there trying to do good work. And
I've been to 4 in the last 5 weeks, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
so do you feel like you get, like, what's your experience going to like Austin and other places like that? Do you feel like the energy is really contagious? Do you?
I think there's different things from different places. Austin is always just a good reboot and reset for me. Austin has a screenwriters conference. If you're not familiar, it's probably the biggest conference in the US. Everyone shows up there, and odd things happen at Austin every time I go there, and you just have these wonderful experiences. I've been lucky enough to become friends with Shane Black, who wrote the Lethal Weapon movies and directed an Iron Man 3 and wrote that and wrote Predator and, all these massive things. And
Awesome.
I was sitting with 3 people that I'd met at Cinestory, which is in California, which, by the way, is phenomenal. You should look into Cinestory. It's amazing. It's a 5-day retreat with mentors and mentees. I was lucky enough to be a mentor this year, and 2 of my mentees,
Cool.
and a third person from there were there. And it's like midnight on a Friday or Saturday night, and we're just sitting in the bar in the hotel that's closed, but we're just sitting there chatting in one of the tables, and Shane walks over because I've interviewed him on the podcast. He knows me a little bit. He goes, "Hey, Lavindra." I said, "What's up, Shane?" And I just gave him a hug, and I turned around, and the 3 people, it was like their jaws were on the floor. Shane Black was right there. I'm like, "You want to sit?" He goes, "Sure." Then he just hung out with us for like an hour and a half. There's not a lot of places that, a screenwriter of that caliber will just come and hang out with people and just have wonderful conversations. And after he left, their mind was blown. And that kind of thing happens a lot at Austin. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of the greatest screenwriters in history. Cinestory was my first year going there. Just magical. 30 mentors, 30 mentees, blown away by the mentors, blown away by the mentees and their unbelievable, unmistakable talents. And when you're not mentoring, you're in sessions and on panels, and it's just all things screenwriting. And it just helps to rejuvenate that little writer within. Another festival we were lucky enough to win an award at. I'll tilt my camera. You see this one 3 weeks ago at a film festival for a movie
Congratulations.
much produced and directed, and all those things just kind of build upon each other. And like I'm here and I'm percolating now. I'm like I have a story, I want to write it, but it's not quite where I need it to be because I'm comfortable with my process. I know I need X, Y, and Z before I can write. Which brings me to you. What is your process that you've developed over this time? How often do you write? First of all, is there a pattern to your writing process? And what do you figure out first? How big of an outline do you do and such?
The answer to how often I write is probably every day. And sometimes the volume or the output is more than other days. Some days hardly anything comes out, but and I've tried to be a bit better with not writing on weekends. For years, I've tried to scale it back to more Monday to Friday in recent times. And I've found that my brain doesn't really kick in till mid-morning, 10, 11 or so onwards. And then I seem to hit my sweet spot at like 3 o'clock. I'm not sure about you, when you're like agonized that you look at the clock and you have to go, whether it's a meeting or a school pickup or a sport. And it's like, oh my God, how do I have to tear myself away from this? And it's a good problem to have because you know that you're getting somewhere. But for me, that seems to happen by the mid-afternoon. So I've worked out my patterns and try to capitalize now on that, mid-morning to mid-afternoon. I'll write through like lunch effectively. Like I'll mix it up between sitting down, standing up, and just try and get several hours done. And then the next day or even sometimes late that night, if I feel like picking up again, I'll go back through what I've done. And as you know, it's always a rewriting and chopping and changing process. Like
the worst is when you're so happy with what you wrote and the next day you pick it up and you're like, what is this junk that I put on a page?
Yeah, or yeah, exactly. When you're like, I'm flowing, I'm on fire, this is amazing. And then it just needs a bit of time, doesn't it? And it settles and you go back.
The best is the opposite. Sometimes you'll pick something up and you're like, oh, wow, this is not bad, actually. Okay. And, you have those moments as well, but you got to have both. I think you got to have both sides of that coin.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. It's all about balance. And one of the worst things is being blocked, and I've had that before. I've had that earlier this year for a period and last year too. I found when that's happened to me, it's probably happened because I've had several projects on at once. So whether that's needing to turn drafts back to producers or, my own projects that I've set my own, self-imposed deadline for. And then I think I can, have in the past anyway, get into a little bit of a mode of feeling overwhelmed and like, oh, there's too many things to focus on, too much to turn back in. And I've, frozen effectively for a few days or, sometimes a little bit longer. But my way that I kind of get out of that is just triaging and trying to go back to, okay, well, this is due by a certain point, or people, I've already received notes from, manager or producer for something. So I really found it useful. Elizabeth Gilbert wrote this book called Big Magic, Creative Living Through Fear.
Is she the one that did
Yeah.
Love?
She is. Yeah.
Different book by her. Okay.
Yeah. So it's really wonderful. So it's so it's nonfiction. So it's just a guidebook, I guess, for pushing through challenges as a person who works in some kind of creative medium or even just in life. And yeah, she kind of has this analogy in there about hitting something over the net, like tennis. So I'm sure, yeah, it's probably well used by people. Just the idea of once you hit something over the net, just go straight onto something else so that you're not sitting around waiting and you're always doing. And so I try and live by that. I think it's really useful because I know sometimes we like hit something over the net and we're crossing our fingers, hoping it lands or something exciting happens with it. But I think for me, sometimes that's when I can be my most productive because I'm nervous, I'm excited, I'm waiting, and I don't want to be overthinking things. So I'll just go straight into the next project. So my process kind of looks much the same week to week. I do play basketball, not very well, but I play competitive sport and I go to the gym a fair bit. So for me, I found in recent years, especially exercise for me is important because as writers, like we sit around a lot and can be pretty sedentary. So I definitely find that endorphins get me thinking and help me think. I noticed that in your episode with Shane Black, it was really awesome hearing about, he talked about, and yourself as well, taking a walk or a drive. I think that in order to move through some challenges or being blocked or just ruminate on some things that might not be working, getting away from the computer is really important. And whether that's walking, running, or driving with no radio on, like I know you'd mentioned, I really loved hearing about how you had that 3-hour journey and you went from your work to home, but didn't even recall like the time.
Just lost in thought, and it's like a 5-minute trip. It's 3 hours in real time, but because my stories are percolating and what's going on, my latest thing is floating. After your float, words will pour out of your fingertips because
Wow.
your story is being processed because you're just in a state of nothingness and your body doesn't have to worry about anything else. So we can go focus on other stuff that you've been pushing back because you have to take care of the kids here and the husband there and the meal here and the that there and the schoolwork, Yeah. So if I find any kind of things where I'm feeling really blocked and I just need something to punch me through, I go float. And it's magic. It really is. I think it's important that we all understand our own process and what triggers us. And I always look for these things called doorways. What's my doorway into creativity? How do I get there? What's going to help me? And so I'm always trying to find things. So I would love to hear things that you do to help trigger you into that.
I love that analogy too, or the phrase doorway, because it is, you do have to step through and step into something, don't you? Like, and you can actually feel because there's a before and after, which I love. Like, because you're always going to have the before you created characters or came up with a story and the after, like, which is a really cool thing, I think, to look back on. Especially because we can be pretty hard on ourselves. I think it's nice to look back and be like, oh, we've come so far. Look, 3 months ago, this person didn't exist. And now you've given them a job and a problem and reflection character and a whole series of things to go through. So, yeah, I think for me, I read a lot and I watch a lot. I do draw inspiration from the works of others. I think for me, it's important to stay on top of, what's being made, what's being commissioned, what's finding an audience. And that spans from like the really big streamers, what they're commissioning and what gets greenlit for a second series and things, all the way through to the much more modest, low or even micro budget independent films that just find their audience and break out because they're just undeniable. Just as a side note, like for me, something I really enjoyed watching was After Sun, Charlotte Wells' film starring Paul Mescal. So she won a BAFTA for it. It's a semi-autobiographical drama, and it's just beautiful cinematic storytelling. Definitely check it out.
I'll check it out for sure.
So yeah, for me, like my doorway can sometimes be to go back to your question, just having a patch of being really inspired by what a lot of other people have put out there, knowing that it takes sometimes years and a lot of hard work and blood, sweat and tears to get something made. And then I do find myself like I can recognize that kind of you mentioned rejuvenation before, at the conferences and the film festivals you go to. Just I do get rejuvenated by watching and reading other people's work, and then that kind of marrying with me having been wanting to explore an idea or a character or something. It's just kind of like that perfect concoction that sometimes leads for me to just wake up and be like, all right, today is the day. And I do try and hold myself accountable. Like if I say I'm going to write something or at least explore an idea, I will at least do a one paragraph or a really rough synopsis or even a log line just to see if there's something there. So that's the beginning of me stepping into something, just seeing if it works on the page or if it doesn't seem feasible or if there's something there. And then, yeah, I'll just commit to fleshing out an idea by returning to it as often as I can, doing the research as well. This has happened to me a few times. I'm not sure if it's happened to you, but coming up with something and being like, this is amazing. What a great idea. I've even done it for an app before, being like, why doesn't this app exist? This would change lives. And then, spending a couple of days, or even this has happened to me with, with a screenplay idea or a pilot, just coming up with it and then finding out, oh my gosh, someone's already done it. Have you done that before?
I want to say dozens of times. Yeah. Where here's how it always ends up. It's not that it's been done, but it's currently being made by a major studio. Like I'm months or maybe a year off from where I should be, as opposed to, it was done years ago. And it's like, yeah, it's, and you know what I take from that? I think to myself, okay, I'm on the right track because great minds think alike.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, like you were onto something.
So I just try to let go and move forward, because if you let that stuff eat away at you, it could do some damage. And so I'm not a fan of that.
No, I agree. Stress, but exactly what you're saying, like stress is not good. We carry enough of it day to day, as you say, with things and with responsibilities that we have and commitments and just humaning, like being human. So yeah, you don't want to impose any more of that on yourself, especially things that can't be helped or changed. We just got to let things go sometimes. I really love to be inspired kind of in conjunction with having a new idea and then holding myself accountable, like at least getting down something on the page just to see if it works. And I have a manager now, and I found something that's been just wonderful with him is I've just floated him a couple of new ideas or thoughts, or, recently one was adapting some existing IP, and just being able to bounce that off of someone now for the first time is really, really valuable, I think, because sometimes I'm a bit like a bull at a gate. Like I compulsively come up with ideas or characters I want to flesh out every week. And I think it's good to have discipline, to be shelving things when they need to be shelved, or just circling back around to them when timing is better, and not needing to have a whole bunch on at once. So yeah, I never struggle to come up with ideas. It's more so just working out when to do them and what needs to come first and where my responsibilities lie. Like
You know,
particularly.
when you start this process, there's two things that you concern yourself with, that you're worried about. Like, how am I ever going to fill 90 to 120 pages? There's no way I can fill that much because I've never written anything that long. And now the difficulty is, how am I going to keep it to 90 to 120 pages because I have so much to say? It's the opposite
Totally.
problem. And, you know, and just going back to what you said, it's the same thing, is like, how am I going to keep coming up with these ideas? And I'm like, oh no, I have a never ending supply of ideas that I'm never going to get to. It's prioritizing them and figuring out which one gets the attention now, which was
Yeah.
not the way that I thought when this whole thing started. So yeah, that's great to hear from that perspective. So tell me
Yeah.
how you went from writing, getting some support from the government to do some writing, to actually getting this particular script. Was this a for hire project? Did you just write it and then sell it? How did Love is in the Air happen for you?
Yeah, great question, because it's like not a straightforward answer, but I was a writer for hire for this. That's the short answer. But I had a lot of freedom to explore, like we mentioned, things I was passionate about, within that space, which is strong women making their own way in the world. I think that something that I realized in retrospect, after this whole process and after that script sold to Netflix and that project was set up at Netflix, was that there really is a lot of value in having a good sample, or having good samples. I know we hear this a lot at conferences and film festivals. It is true because, after so many years of pitching a lot of my own work and trying to get things made and having things or scripts rather optioned by producers in many cases, and being in holding patterns and waiting, I still at times got frustrated that, things weren't happening or not happening very quickly in my case. But the idea that you can have a script that you feel is polished enough to send to producers, it does have value in it, because you never do know when someone's going to read something, a development executive or a producer, and say, hey, this, we can't make this for whatever reason, or this isn't for us, but we like your style, we like your voice, and would you want to come in and have a meeting and see if there's something we can work on together? And that's what happened with this particular film, Love is in the Air. So I did, it was called Melbourne International Film Festival, but within that they had like a development initiative. I've attended it a few times in person, and it's pretty cool because it's just a series of roundtables and you get really quick speed pitches. They team up writers with development executives and producers, and you just kind of chat and see if you have any common ground or if there's any opportunity to work together. And I'd attended it a couple of times in person, but this was still in the kind of latter part of COVID when these things weren't happening. So we just did it via Zoom, and I did a Zoom with these producers, and the company is Jaggy Entertainment, and they've been set up here in Australia for a few years, and they had a really admirable output. I remember reading about what they'd done, and they'd made so many things in a short span of time. So like they had done quite a few Lifetime style TV movie romances. They'd also done a Netflix young adult series, and they just seemed to be always working and always doing. So I had a meeting with them and sent them some samples, and then the producers passed them on to the development executive, and she got in touch and some months later, and she said, could we find something to work on together, and just floated a couple of ideas to me, and then also welcomed new ideas too. So we went back and forth with some log lines and a couple of pictures, and then things that they were thinking. And then they had this particular story world in mind. They knew they wanted to create a project with seaplanes, knowing how beautiful they would look on the big screen, and they were right.
Oh, yeah. It does look
Yeah,
cinematography is great in the movie.
it is. And I was really on that too. I was really thankful I got to fly up to the premiere screening that they did for cast and crew and see it on the big screen before it dropped on Netflix. And I was so glad that I did that, because this film really did look beautiful in a cinema. So that's a bit bittersweet in the sense that it didn't get a theatrical release, being a Netflix original. Went straight to Netflix, which was amazing too because of the global reach that it had. But yeah, I think the producers' instincts were spot on. The planes just looked beautiful.
Awesome.
And the locations up in the Whitsundays and the tropics. So yeah, they'd had this story world in mind, and then it was just a matter of, we went back and forth for a while and really drilled into the kind of story they wanted to tell and who the character was and what she was up against. And it took shape pretty quickly from there. So in terms of the actual time frame, from the concept through to scripting and production was pretty fast, because I delivered my draft probably around maybe April, May last year. And then they went out with it. They didn't use a sales agent, to my knowledge. They just had a good relationship with Netflix and took it to them. And that was acquired by Netflix in September. And production was February, March. And it was released in September of this year.
Wow.
So pretty fast. Yeah.
That's really, really fast for development and production. So not even 2 years for the entire process.
Not even 2 years. Yeah. They knew what they wanted to achieve. And when Netflix acquired the project, the budget got exponentially bigger, which was great for the team and for the project. So what happened was the director came on board with his writing partner, and they worked on the script too. So the three of us, eventually, it was a collaborative process, and we'd all worked across the script, and they brought a lot of really exciting texture and life to the world, because there were new opportunities now with the budget being bigger, with locations and with different set pieces. And then when casting happened, I think that was when it also became clear that this was going to potentially be quite a well received Australian film anyway. I wasn't sure how it would go globally, but Delta Goodrem was cast in it, and she's kind of like, if we were to liken her to someone, she's a bit like Australia's Mariah Carey. Like, she's just, yeah, she's so well known here.
Is she on The Voice?
Yeah. She was the host on The Voice for quite a long time, several seasons. And, she acted in one of the well-known ongoing soap series here, Neighbours. She was in Neighbours for quite some time. And her music career has been really successful for her. And she's a household name here. So she's very well known and very well respected. And she was cast in the protagonist role of Dana. And when I hopped onto the table read, it was herself and Joshua and Steph and Roy and the rest of the amazing cast starting to read the script. That's when I've got that first, or second rather. The first buzz was when I got the phone call from the development executive that said Netflix had bought the project and we're going to be financing it with the company. And I was really jazzed about that, because I was like, oh, Netflix, it's exciting. And then the second buzz of excitement was during the table read, because they just embodied the character so beautifully, even in that early rehearsal process, and seeing Delta as well. And, knowing that I'd just grown up watching her and listening to her music, and that people, really loved her and her work, I could start to see that it was potentially going to be, really well received. So that was exciting. Yeah, I think it just goes to show that going back to just put your work out there, put yourself out there and pitch yourself. Also for me, I was always letting people know when I went into a pitch meeting that I'm quite pliable, that I can hop between genres. I love a challenge. I'm okay and receptive and excited by working on other people's projects. I think especially starting out in the industry, it's all well and good to want to bring your stories to the world, but there's a process for things, and things aren't always going to be as straightforward as that. I mean, that would be the dream, getting something that I wrote, produced, financed, and out in the world. But walking before I can crawl isn't always, isn't necessarily the best way forward either. So this was the way it went for me. And I'm really thankful, because it's given me a good springboard, I think, for future and current work that I'm already doing now off the back of it. And it's just been a really positive experience so far.
I can't imagine it not being a positive experience. And if you haven't had a chance, go check out Love is in the Air. It is on Netflix. I watched it just a few days ago here in the US, and thoroughly enjoyed it. I will admit, I went in with this Lifetime TV mentality, thinking it was going to be something like that, and it's so much more than that. So good on you and on the crew that put the thing together. It's visually dynamic. The performances are great. It's got stakes in it. It was nicely done. It was very natural, and it reminded me of something on my bucket list, is to get my pilot's license, which I haven't thought about for years. I'm like,
oh, cool.
I got to go back and get my pilot's license at some point. So let's put that back into my brain, into the rotation of things that need to be accomplished. So Did you get to fly in a seaplane as research for this?
No, but I watched a whole bunch of yeah, just existing footage. There's a lot out there, thankfully. It was really good to just look at how they move, what they look like. And I think there's a real elegance to what they are when they're up in the sky. And then as you mentioned, like gliding onto the water, it's kind of almost emulating like an aquatic bird of some kind. Like they're certainly really interesting to watch them come in. But I did fly up to set for the last 3 days, and that was just fantastic. You know, seeing these the planes, you know, the one they were using for the over and under shots, and then also the seaplane itself, and just looking at how green screen works. And that was just really exciting to me, seeing how much effort goes into that, and then in conjunction with what it looks like eventually the finished film was so impressive and really exciting to see. Yeah, and just seeing how hard everyone works. I know that sounds obvious, but behind the scenes, you know, people are just around the clock, you know, working tirelessly just for those minutes, you know, several minutes a day of time that's makes it in the can, or, you know, makes it to screen. It's incredible and it's really impressive. And I think it helped inform my craft a bit more too. Probably a takeaway I had after going up to set was just simplifying a few things I do, because seeing, you know, as well on set, some scenes that had to be cut due to time constraints or just due to things logistically that weren't quite translating, you know, that was interesting too. So I'm probably writing a bit simpler, if that makes sense, than I used to, not as superfluous with little details that don't need to be in there. So that was a good learning curve.
You know, one of the things I harp with students on is it's day or night. Those are the only times we shoot. You know, unless it has to be a dawn for a very specific person, don't say dawn, don't say evening, don't say dusk, because those are little tiny windows that no crew is ever going to night or it's day. And let's keep it simple. But first of all, so happy for your success. Congratulations on that. And what is on the horizon for you if we're going to keep this seaplane analogy going?
Well, lots of things, I hope. Like, it was interesting that, and in a very positive way, I'm very thankful for the opportunities and for the reach of Love Is in the Air recently. But it was interesting to me that the first feature that I wrote that was, you know, produced and made into a film was a romantic comedy, a lighthearted, very accessible, family-friendly one at that, because I've written much darker genre projects in recent years and still am now. You know, I've got a Western that I'm working on, which I'm really excited about. And that's quite gritty. And that's a colonial set Western that's effectively the prequel to a film called The Proposition that was made in the early 2000s. That was written by Nick Cave and stars Ray Winstone and Guy Pearce. And I'm working with the producer and another producer on very similar story world, but different characters. And that's been really exciting, and I'm really excited about that one. And yeah, so I am working on genre projects which are very far away and worlds away from the lighthearted romantic comedy that's just been released. But I'm also working on a creature feature with the same producers. That's a survival thriller, and that's shaping up to be really fun. And so far, so good with that. And they took that project to American film market recently.
Last weekend. It might still be going on this week, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was at AFM last year with my last film that I directed. And so yeah, I have a bunch of friends that are actually at AFM right now. Yeah.
Exciting. Yeah. I imagine the energy there would be electric. Got a couple of projects with sales agents there, and I think people work around the clock, and there's a lot of networking, and there's a lot of positive things that come out of it.
Time you go to AFM, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
Process. You know, it's basically a giant hotel in Santa Monica where every room in the hotel is either by someone who's got a company who's selling projects or someone who's got a company who's buying and listening to pitches. And hundreds and hundreds, or if not thousands, of these rooms. And it's a lot. It's a lot to process.
Well, I will try and get there one year. I'm a bit like like Joe March from Little Women. Like, I'm not sure if you recall, but like she always has to have her back to the wall. And in her case, she sets her skirts on fire because she has her back to the fireplace. That's very much me. Like when I go into a room, I'm like, where's the wall? I got to go and lean against it and put myself in a corner. I'm not great.
Well,
Yeah.
nobody can sneak up on you that way. So I feel I resemble that remark. Like whenever my wife and I go to a restaurant, I want to sit to where I can see the doorway. I don't know,
Yes,
but
totally.
but I do want to do that. I don't know what that is about me, but so she always has to pause and go, okay, which way are you sitting? You know, and give me the choice. She's good about that. Leave me with a note for the people who were a few years behind you, who are trying to get to that next level. What's that thing that can help them break through, that helped you break through?
Well, I don't have a super big amount of wisdom to dispense because, as you mentioned, I'm just still emerging myself, but, was trying to bust down doors for quite some time. I guess it would be to not try and throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. I know that's an analogy that's used a lot too, because you can try and do a lot of everything, but not necessarily do it all well. If you just have a very small handful of projects that are dear to you for whatever reason, even if no one else gets them, or if they're even set in a world or time or, Marvel size budget that isn't necessarily feasible to get made, especially as an emerging writer who will possibly or most likely end up working on other people's projects to start with. I still think, just if I can swear, just write the shit out of those projects. Just really commit to them, even if it's if it's a pilot spec or a feature spec, just commit to it, write it backwards and forwards, know it better than anyone. And then if you use that as a sample, whether that's to get representation or, to get through, the gatekeepers at bigger, larger scale companies that are actively making projects, I think that you will bubble to the top and you'll stand out and you will get opportunities, because I know from experience, and I've made mistakes with sending things out before they're ready and then getting a pass, and just knowing instinctively in my gut, well, partly that was probably because my voice wasn't clear enough, or it wasn't undeniable, and feeling like, oh, it wasn't my best work. So you don't want to be sending something out if you already know that that's how you'd feel after you get a pass. So I think just have those top, 1, 2, or 3 samples that you feel are undeniable because they're written so well that someone, whether it's an assistant or, an assistant to a manager, or someone will read it and go, man, like, we can't necessarily make this, but this person knows the craft. They've obviously deeply committed to it, even if it's not their day job, or, whilst competing amongst a whole bunch of other people who want our attention. And we want to talk to them because they could, end up, being in a really effective, successful working relationship with us on something else.
No, I could not agree more. I think that's probably how I've gotten 2 or 3 writing assignments, was somebody read something else that was just never going to get made. I feel that, everyone spends so much time reading all the books that are out on screenwriting and trying to make it fit this perfect, 15 points or 22 points or whatever it is, that they lose themselves in that process. And I think it's imperative that you, exactly what you said, is take that thing that is you, that is in your voice, that you're passionate about. And, if you're going to break the rules, break them with purpose and just go balls out with it, but you're not allowed to write something they can't see. Yeah, technically, but go ahead, like, go ahead and just.
Totally. Absolutely.
It's going to add gravitas to the scene, then add it in there,
Yes.
And so I couldn't agree more. Well, Katherine, I am so grateful that you took the time. What time is it where you are, by the way?
Oh, it's only 11 o'clock in the morning, or about 11:15. So this is when I'm about to start peaking. It's a good time for me. I'm awake now. I'm going to start to dive into something.
Well, it's almost 8:00 p.m. where I am on the US. But I'm very grateful for you to take the time, and excited for people to get to hear this and learn more about you and your work.
That's very kind of you. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Lavinda.
We wish you the best, and we can't wait to see what you come up with next.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Until next time. Thank you so much for watching this video, and as a small token of my appreciation, I want to offer you a free video course on how to outline your screenplay. I normally charge $299 for this course, but for a limited time, it is free. Now, it is a 5-day course, but I'm giving you 7 days to finish this outline, okay? After 7 days, that course goes away. So if you're not dedicated and you don't want to knock out a killer outline for your screenplay, don't do it. But if you do, click the link below. I can't wait to hear how you like it.